Welcome to Wine and Wisdom for this week, Parshat Vayakhel-Pikudei. Please join me in making a bracha on our wine. L'chaim Phil, L'chaim Laura, Marilyn, Arnold, good to see you all. Baruch Atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam borei pri hagoshen. L'chaim, L'chaim.
L'chaim, L'chaim.
Okay, one second. Somebody just informed me that he's tuning in. Let me just send him the login information.
Did you text Brett?
I did not. Can you do that, please?
I'll do that right now.
Okay. So welcome to Wine and Wisdom for Parshat Vayakhel-Pikudei. The topic for this week's class is a very exciting one. We're going to talk about leadership skills. And the topic is, the people always come first except for when they don't. A true leader isn't concerned about being a true leader. And this is a very, very powerful message we can take. But as always, before we begin, let's start with a little overview of the Parsha. So this week we have it's a couple of exciting, I feel like I've been saying this for a couple of weeks already. There's a couple of exciting things this week. We have a double Parsha, right? A double portion. Which we don't always do, so 2 parshas in 1 week, and we have Chazak. So at the end of each book of the Torah, as each book ends, right? There's 5 books of Moses. As each book ends, we move on to the next one. We always end off by saying Chazak, Chazak, v'nit chazek. The entire congregation rises and says, "Let us be strong, strong, and be strengthened." Why is that? Because as we finish one book of the Torah, we want to be going from one book to the other and continuing that strength, and always studying Torah. In any event, so before we get started, we'll just do a quick Parsha overview. In this week's Parsha, Moses assembles the Jewish people, and this is right at the beginning. It says Moses assembles the Jewish people. Vayakhel, he gathers the Jewish people together, and he tells them about the mitzvah of Shabbat. Yes, again, there's many messages there, but we'll leave that for a different day. He then talks about all the different things that are required for the tabernacle, for building the Mishkan. We've been talking about this for a few weeks, but he continues this conversation. Gold, silver, copper, blue, purple, and red dyed wool, goat hair, spun linen, animal skins, wood, olive oil, herbs, and precious stones. And eventually the Jewish people are bringing so much, they're bringing. The Moshe has to tell them, that's it, that's enough. We've got enough donations, right? And that was the last time that a shul ever said we have enough donations.
I was going to say, you should have that problem.
Amen. Unfortunately, most shuls that I know of are running on a deficit. Anyways, okay. We'll leave that for a different time. But in any event, here, Moshe told him to stop. There was a team of wise-hearted artisans who actually put together the entire Mishkan. And just like we've been learning for the past few weeks, the instructions, kind of the blueprints for the Mishkan, the tabernacle. In this week's Parsha, we learn about how that's actually executed, and the Jewish people actually go through with it. The contractors, so to speak, which were not Moshe and Aaron, not Moses and Aaron, as you possibly would have assumed. There were two particular folks named Betzalel and Ahaliav. And all of them together, they did all of these things. They also spun the clothing, the special garments that we learned about already. Once the entire Mishkan, the entire tabernacle was erected, Moses anointed it with the holy anointing oil, and he initiated Aaron and his 4 sons into the priesthood, and boom, a cloud appears over the Mishkan, signifying the Shekhinah, the divine presence of Hashem that has come to dwell within it. And that's how we end off this second book, the book of Exodus. The topic of tonight's class is very, very exciting. And before we even get to it from the Parsha, I want to open up by really talking about this idea. So why don't we start with a chat? Is that okay?
Parsha's a Chodesh.
Is that this week?
I think so.
Yes, it would be this week because it's Shas Vayakhel. Yes. And it's also Erev Rosh Chodesh. Yeah, sure. That's true. Correct. It's also special this week. We have one of the extra 4 parshas that we've been reading. And this week we read Parshat HaChodesh. But I want to talk today about leadership. Okay? Here is my question. Please type it in the chat. It's a word association game. Are you ready? I say good leader. Give me one word that's important for a good leader. In order to be a good leader, you need to have... If you want to do 3 words, you can do 3 words as well. And if you want to unmute, you can do that as well. Common, what do you say? In order to be a good leader, you need to be?
You need vaccines.
Okay, I like it. Very good. Service, very good. Service, you like service to the public. Very good. Decisive, yes. Musical training.
Yes, in German, Lieder means songs.
Oh, very good. That's true. A leader. Very good. Okay. Let's hear some other ones. Come on. Arnold, what you got?
Yeah.
Stephanie, what do you think? In order to be a good leader, what do you need? Alan?
Well,
Wisdom.
Wisdom. That's a good one. I'm going to put it down. Wisdom.
Patience.
Honesty. Thank you, Marilyn. Very good. Mission oriented. Yes. In order to be able to lead the team, you have to have good view of the mission. Very good. I like it. Simcha Bracha, where'd you go? Alina, you tuned out? We lost you?
No, I'm here. I'm more listening though than.
No, you didn't lose me. I just was thinking.
What do you think, Marguerite? What do you think? In order to be a true leader, a good leader, what do you need?
You need to have ability to work with people, influence people, try to get
I love
support.
it. These are a lot of the things we're having here. Patience is a good one. Sonia, I like that. All right. Today we're going to learn about leadership from the Torah's perspective. And before we do so, let me just point out, I'll share with you a story of a friend of mine. In fact, I'll share with you, he once posted this on Facebook, and I found it before this class. It's a good friend of mine. He's actually a couple years my senior, and he was in yeshiva with me. And he writes as follows. He says, I vividly remember the time I was offered my first managerial, is that the word? Position. It was exciting and empowering. And I recall one of the first things that I did after I accepted the position. I went on Amazon. I went on an Amazon shopping spree. If I remember correctly, among the spoils were The Effective Executive from Peter Drucker and Good to Great by James Collins. There were probably others as well, but those titles stick out in my memory. Now, how many tips and tricks from said literature do I currently implement or even remember? Well, I'd rather not answer the question, but I'll say this. It was a nice try. Leadership is definitely something that the world is very much preoccupied, especially now as the years go on. There's a lot of research that comes out that with a proper leader, the company can succeed, etc. But it turns out leadership is not only necessary in companies. Leadership is also necessary in our private lives. If you're a spouse, there's a particular leadership role that you may be asked to take, in the household. If you're a parent, there's certainly certain things that you need to do in terms of you are a leader to a certain degree. And you're a leader in your community, you're a leader in the people around you. The fact of the matter is that if you exist, then you have a certain amount of leadership. If you're human, at least, I shouldn't say exist. I'm not sure that stones take any particular leadership role, or trees. But if you're human, then there are certain leadership responsibilities that you have, and either you're erasing them, or you're flunking them, or you're just floating along. That's fine. But in this week's parsha, we get some interesting insight into what it means to be a true leader. And I am talking, of course, about the Nisi'im, the princes of the Jewish people. Let's start off by diving into the story of the donations that we mentioned that were too much. Remember the one time in history that the Jews donated too much. Laura, can you get us started, please? Text 1.
Then all the wise men who were doing the work of the holy came, each from his work that they had been doing. And they spoke to Moshe, saying, the people are bringing very much, more than is enough for the labor of the articles that Hashem had commanded to do. So Moshe commanded, and they announced in the camp, saying, let no man or woman do any more work for the offering for the holy. So the people stopped bringing, and the work was sufficient for them all. The work was sufficient for them for all the work to do it and to leave over.
Yeah, that's a little not such a great job on the translation there. I mean, it's more of a literal translation than an effective translation. But you get the idea. The Jewish people, there's too much. The Jewish people are bringing too much, and Moses has to tell them, stop, spread the word. We have enough. Thank you, Laura. Among this, or in the middle of this whole donating frenzy, let's call it, right? There was one group of people that was glaringly absent. That was the princes of the Jewish people. When I say the princes, what do I mean? There was this group of people called the Nisi'im, the leaders of the Jewish people, called them the ministers, the princes, whatever it is. And basically, there were 12 of them. And we learn about them occasionally. And in this instance, they are the leaders of the Jewish people. They're the ones who give over the messages. And it's one for each tribe. and they're supposed to kind of make sure that the whole process is going smoothly. Moses has a message to pass out to the entire nation. Each one of them is in charge of their tribe. They lead. They're supposed to show the way, and they're supposed to make sure that everybody's following direct orders. But when it came to donating for the Mishkan, for some reason they're glaringly absent. Eventually, they do donate something, and text 2 gives it to us. Arnold, can you read for us, please? Don't forget to unmute.
And every man with whom was found blue, purple, or crimson wool, linen, goat, hair, ram skins dyed red, or tashash skins brought them. Everyone who set aside an offering of silver or copper brought their offerings for God, and everyone with whom acacia wood was found for any work of the service brought it. And every wise-hearted woman spun with her hands, and they brought spun materials, blue, purple, and crimson wool, and linen. And all the women whose hearts uplifted them with wisdom spun the goat hair. And the princes brought the shohan, stones and filling stones for the ephod and for the hushan, and the spice and the oil for the lighting, and for the anointing oil, and for the incense.
Thank you. I want to call your attention to this particular word, Vehanesim. Look at me, fancy. Look at that. Which means, and the princes. The word Vehanesim is not normally spelled this way. It's missing a little yud. It says Vav, Hey, Nun, Sin, Aleph. There should be a little yud afterwards, and then a final mem. Well, a letter is missing. What's going on here? So Rashi points out that what's going on here is as follows. The Nesim, these princes, these leaders of the 12 tribes, are not just mentioned separately and last because that's where they're mentioned, but they're mentioned last because they actually did bring their donations last, as a matter of fact. Very interesting. Why would they have brought last? This has a very interesting background story. And let's read all about it in text 3, which is Rashi clarifying for us why the yud is missing. Kalman, can you read for us, please?
Rabbi Natan said, "What promoted the prince to donate the dedication of the altar first, while they did not donate first for the work of the Mishkan?" This is what the princes said. "Let the community donate what they will donate, and whatever they're missing will complete." Since the community completed everything as it is said, and the work was sufficient, the princes said, "Well, what are we to do?" So they brought the shoham stones, etc. Therefore, they brought donations first for the dedication of the altar. Inasmuch as they were lazy the first time, they did not immediately donate, but a letter is missing from their name, and Hanesim is written that way instead of Hanesim with those yuds with the additional yud.
Okay, very interesting. So,
2 yuds.
what was that?
2 yuds. The 2.
I'm not sure if both yuds are missing. I thought I saw that one of the yuds was there, wasn't it? No,
It's
you're
not
right.
spe-
Correct.
yeah.
It's missing 2 yuds. Correct. So I went back to the text. Sorry about that. Okay. So we had just read this one. So this is an interesting backstory. So it turns out that everything was donated, and there was actually even superfluous amount besides for these 3 particular things: the shoham stones, the oil, and what was the last thing? I forget the third thing. In any event, and indeed, if we turn later in the Torah to when the tabernacle is actually dedicated, we find that they are the first to dedicate the tabernacle. Phil, can you read for us, please?
The chieftains brought offerings for the dedication of the altar on the day it was anointed. The chieftains presented their offerings in front of the altar. Hashem said to Moses, one chieftain each day shall present his offering for the dedication of the altar. The one who brought his offering on the first day was Nashon, the son of Aminadab of the tribe of Judah, and his offering was 1 silver bowl weighing 130 shekels, 1 silver sprinkling basin weighing 70 shekels, according to the holy shekel, both filled with fine flour mixed with olive oil for a meal offering. 1 spoon weighing 10 shekels of gold filled with incense, 1 young bull, 1 ram, and 1 lamb in its first year for burnt offering, 1 young he-goat for sin offering, and for the peace offering, 2 oxen, 5 rams, 5 he-goats, 5 lambs in their first year. This was the offering of Nashon, the son of Aminadab.
Very interesting. So this was the process that was followed when the tabernacle, the Mishkan, was dedicated. The Nisim, these princes, these same chieftains, they came first. And they said, whoa, not only are we coming first, but you see this whole description we just had, all this for the dedication of one building, the tabernacle, right? That's all one of the leaders of the 12 tribes. So this process went on for 12 days. Every single day, another one of those princes would bring this whole full sacrifice and all this business. And by the way, this coming Sunday, which is Rosh Chodesh Nisan, is going to be the first day of the month of Nisan, we actually commemorate this process, this dedication process that they did. In fact, every day of the first 12 days of the month of Nisan, which means starting this Sunday, going for 12 days, we read something called Parshat Hanasi, which means each day we read about, it's pretty identical for the most part. Each day we read about the dedication offerings that were brought by one of the 12 leaders, princes of the 12 tribes. And what we do is at the end of that, we say a special Yehi Ratzon, a special prayer where we beseech God, and we say that if we are from that tribe, because since none of us know which tribe we're from, including the Kohanim, there's also an answer for that. We can talk about that at a different time, if that interests you. But either way, we are not 100% sure which tribe we're from. Therefore, we say, if I am from this tribe, then may I be forgiven because of the leader of my tribe who brought a sacrifice on that day. By the way, on Hanukkah, we also read about all 12 of these dedications. And because Hanukkah was the rededication of the temple, so we read about the original dedication of the tabernacle. So this was a pretty big deal. It was a 12-day party where it was literally offerings being brought to Hashem, beautiful spices, lots of gold and silver being donated to the Beit HaMikdash, led by who? Who was first and foremost there? Were these 12 leaders of the tribes. So now we start to get to the questions of the day. All right, question number 1. First of all, nobody asked us, and I was wondering, maybe you're all just too polite to cut me off, but we kept saying that the Jewish people brought so many donations that there was too much and they had to tell them to stop, correct?
Yes.
But then we went on to say that the Nisim, these princes, these 12 leaders of the tribes, brought the shoham stones and the fragrance and the spices. I mean, the fragrant oils and the spices. So 1 second. So it wasn't too much. Why didn't they just accept more from the Jewish people? How was this left over for them to be able to bring?
Well, the stuff that they... Oh, sorry.
Come again?
I was going to say, I think the stuff that they brought was more for the building of it, wasn't it? Rather than...
They brought for everything. They brought for everything. The Jewish people brought for everything. They brought animals, they brought money, they brought everything. Cash.
Maybe the things that the Nisim brought were not given by the rest of the Jewish people.
Well, yes, but then the question becomes on that other verse. It says that there was too much, and then Moshe Rabbeinu had to tell them, spread out a message, and we're going to stop. We just read that in one of the texts.
So what they brought that never had to be replenished. It was forever. Whereas the gifts that were brought in from the 12 tribes, they eventually the spices, etc., etc.
Everything needed to be replenished. No, that's not true. You're right. That it helped to build the tabernacle, but there was always donations coming into the temple. Every once a year, they would do the machatzit shekel.
Right.
Everybody would give half a shekel in order to supply the sacrifices, in order to help with repairs and that kind of thing. 100%.
But the stones didn't have to be brought in anew.
The stones not, but the spices and the oil for sure did.
Yeah.
And anyway, that's question number 1. But I really let's take a little deeper here. Let's just analyze this story here for a second. We just explained that there was a reason. Rashi explains to us that there's a reason why the princes brought their donations last. They figured, let everybody else donate. Right? This is what Rashi tells us. Let everybody else donate. Whatever is left over, whatever there isn't left over, right? We will fill in. All right, there wasn't that much to fill in. They ended up with like a couple of things, and we're still not sure why those things were still available for them to do. But either way, there were still a couple of things available for them to do, and they did those, and they filled in the end of it, right? This to me sounds like a fairly, good tactic. Somebody needs to be the closer, right? Somebody needs to finish the job. Somebody needs to say, all right, the Chabad house needs $2 million. Let's run a crowd fundraising campaign, and I'm willing to pick up the tab. No matter how much is left, I'll pay the rest. They happen to get lucky, but let's say the Jews wouldn't have, right? By the way, that position is available for the mikveh. I think they need to land on $150,000 now. On a very serious note, by the way, I know a lot of you are coming Sunday for the Dina Horowitz lecture, or even if you're not, if you're coming at some point on Shabbos, whatever, I highly encourage you to try and get a tour of the mikveh with Rabbi Anoka. Ask him to show you around, because it's really starting to look gorgeous. All the tiles are going up, and the whole thing is really starting to look very, very pretty. So, I mean, the outside of the building is done already, as I'm sure many of you have seen. Anyways, leaving aside the mikveh for now. So, what was that?
It's gorgeous, Baruch Hashem.
Baruch Hashem. So here's the question. It's one thing to call somebody lazy if they just didn't bother getting around to donate. It's quite another thing. You know, as a rabbi, you know how in what big trouble I would be if I told my biggest donor, who tells me, listen, you're making a $2 million campaign, Rabbi, whatever is left over, I'll fill it in. By the way, I had somebody once told me this, not about a $2 million campaign, whatever, but about a smaller campaign. We ran a campaign, I think it was like $15,000 and $20,000, and one fellow told me at the end of the campaign, whatever, already a lot of it had been donated, but he told me at the end of it, whatever's missing, I'm going to put in. And it ended up being like $2,500. So, which was a pretty big deal. Imagine if I would have looked at this guy and said, you're so lazy. I wouldn't have gotten anything. But that's exactly what Rashi calls the princes. He says they were lazy. Lazy? Maybe you could say there's better ways for them to have led the Jewish people with their donations, but to call them lazy, they took a particular tactic.
They weren't, there was no humility there. They set themselves apart from the people. You know, it just seems like they should have given along walking with their people. And then if there was more needed to give it, I think that would have been more in tuned. It was a little bit, I think, pompous to say, well, we'll give whatever isn't, you know,
standoffish.
Okay.
I think
maybe this lacks a little bit of humility. I hear you. Okay, that makes sense.
I think that she's on the right track, but let me put another thing in here too, is that it's the way you calculate things. You know, I'll give you an example. When Moses killed the Mitzrayim back in Egypt, he could have easily figured, look, I see all the bad stuff going around.
Right.
I can actually serve better in the palace and help the Jews out that way than take a chance and sticking up for this one guy in this pit right now. Right. In other words, Moses could have calculated, but he didn't. He just did what was right. He didn't put.
Sometimes I can't argue with you, Alan. That's the point we're going to get to.
Yeah, he didn't put it. So what they're doing here is these princes they're putting in their own calculations into this. There was a specific mitzvah to go do something, and they should have been the leaders in doing that.
Absolutely.
But they were injecting their own calculus.
Well,
Moses.
Hold on. I'm going to agree with you on some of that, and some of that not. Let me ask you a question, Alan. Okay, let me phrase the question this way. Okay,
yeah.
Let's present this as if there's only two ways to lead. Okay, obviously there's many more ways, and there's many more. Yeah. Everybody gave different perspectives on leadership here, and let's open this question up for everybody. Okay, in your opinion, should it? Because let me just paint two scenarios here for you for a second, right? Let's say the beach is full of rubbish and whatever, right? And people are really trashing it, and which happens, right? And we got to do a cleanup day, and everybody's going to pick up their stuff, and we're going to recycle and all that sort of thing, whatever. And if we make it clean, then people won't litter, etc. A whole thing like that, right? So some politician runs a full campaign, all right? Here's the question, okay? Would you say, because both of these are leadership qualities, would you say the primary quality that a leader has to have is that he's the first one to roll up his sleeves and get down there and pick up the first piece of trash, even if it's only ceremoniously, but at least he does it and creates that vibe? Obviously, it would be better if it wasn't just ceremonious. Or, because this is also a very important leadership quality, would you say that it's important for that person to be there the entire time? Which means that he makes an announcement. He says, I don't care if this takes a day. I don't care if this takes a week. I don't care if this takes a month. I'm putting on my political leader voice. This is my political leader. I will be here until every single last bit of plastic is picked up from the beach. And then he actually follows through with that. What did you say? That's a point. And even if he's not picking up the entire time, he's got to eat lunch, he's got to sleep, but he sleeps on the beach and it's all over the news. And everybody says he saw the project through to the last little bit. That's also a position of leadership. Which one would you say is more important? Are you on the leading by example, like take initiative, like you start the project off, or you finish the project off?
Both.
Which? Okay. Anybody else? Anybody think one in particular?
I think it might depend on the particular thing at hand. Both kind of have their qualities to them. Sometimes you're in a position where you kind of got to make a statement, and in cases where you got to make a statement, you actually have to do it yourself. Sometimes
you have to start it off on your own.
There are times when people have to literally see you doing it. There are times like that.
I think in this situation, we would say that both types of people, both leadership approaches are going to be seen by everybody. Either you're going to be seen as the starter, or they're going to be seen as the closer. I just want to point out that Buzz is making a very good point in the chat here. I know not everybody sees the chat. Buzz says, always you got to be the one to finish it. Why? He says, because an unfinished project is nothing. And he's very right about that. Let's take that example with the cleaning up the beach, right? Imagine you have one of those politicians. And by the way, how often does this happen? How often does this happen? It goes, because these parts are not covered by the news, right? He gets up to, he makes a whole stance. We're going to start the cleaning of the beach project. It's going to take us months, but we're going to start the whole thing. And he picks up ceremonies in the first piece of trash. 3 days later, he's in the restaurant eating. You know, he's busy meeting with people in City Hall, no problem. And the trash and the beach is still filthy because nobody bothered finishing it up. Right after he picked up the first piece, another 50 people came. They cleaned up a couple pieces. Before you know it, it started again. And everybody just continued littering the whole thing. How often is it that we hear on the news about a project that starts, big, massive start, right? And then we never hear about the closing. Sometimes you're like, what happened to that project? And then you go and you dig and you find one investigative reporter who reported that, yeah, the project fell by the wayside, right? Because it's not just about starting, it's also about finishing, Alan. We're just trying to make the opposite approach here.
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, they're both good qualities. You kind of need both in a way, but
I agree 100%.
That's why I said start off. Well, you need both. He needs to start at the beginning and at the end. He has to be able to finish, and even in the middle, he should be able to show leadership there as well.
100%. So let's start off. Well, these were some of the questions that we had mentioned. Okay, I forgot to show these slides. All right. So let's start off. Oh, there's a lot of slides here. Oh boy. What's the best way for the princess to lead the Mishkan's construction? Doing first or waiting until the end and filling in the rest? Right? I think we've driven home this question very properly. Okay. So text 5a, we start off by seeing what did Moses do? Remember, Moses wasn't one of the 12 leaders of the tribes. Moses was the overall leader of the Jewish people. What was his approach? So he wasn't so involved in this project. I mean, he was very involved in this project, but he doesn't play a role here in that way. But he does play a very large role when it comes to Sinai, right? That's Moses' moment. Simcha Bracha, can you read for us, please? Text 5a.
Gladly. And God said to Moses, go to the people and prepare them today and tomorrow, and they shall wash their garments, and they shall be prepared for the third day. For on the third day, the Lord will descend from the eyes of all the people upon Mount Sinai. And you shall set boundaries for the people around, saying, beware of ascending the mountain or touching its edge. Whoever touches the mountain shall surely be put to death. No hand shall touch it, for he shall be stoned or cast down. Whether man or beast, he shall not eat. When the ram's horn sounds alone, drawn out blast, they may ascend the mountain. So Moses descended from the mountain to the people, and he prepared the people, and they washed their garments.
Okay, so this is Hashem giving Moshe Rabbeinu instructions for Mount Sinai, right? This is the beginning of the process of Mount Sinai. This is 3 days, it's actually 6 days before the giving of the Torah, and he tells them about this whole process of what they're supposed to do. Now, Simcha Bracha, Rashi immediately, right? Rashi is always our first and foremost commentator, right? Rabbi Shlomo Yitzchaki, for those of you that don't know him, and he always gives us, he's trying to fill us in for what's going on. Now, Simcha Bracha, if you continue to read for us, Rashi in text 5b explains to us what Moses actually did. Go for it.
From the mountains to the people. This teaches us that Moses did not turn to his own affairs, but went directly from the mountain to the people.
So Rashi points out that the words min hahar el ha'am, which means that Moses went from the mountain to the people, they illustrate that Moses took the approach of not taking even a second to dilly-dally. He wasn't involved in anything. He right away went directly to telling the people what to do and helping them prepare and getting ready. Now, this is a very interesting Rashi. I don't know how many of us here really thought that Moses comes down from the mountain. God just told him, you got to prepare the Jewish people. Mount Sinai, they're giving him the Torah. This is the moment. It's all coming down here. Moses comes down from the mountain, gets a text message, takes a look. Oh God, I didn't realize I got to pay my taxes. Let me take care of my taxes first. Then I'm going to go tell the Jewish people that we got to go. What this is? I doubt he even changed a diaper on the way. You know what I mean? Like Moses, first of all, Moses being who he was, but even without being Moses, I have a feeling that if Phil or Alan or Arnold was the one doing it, then you would also be, you know what I mean? You'd also go directly to tell the Jewish people what you're supposed to do. I mean, God gave you a mission, and not just any mission. So the Rebbe adds some very, very deep insight here. We're not talking here about taxes, and we're not talking about changing diapers. We're not talking about any physical needs. And Sonia, if I can ask you to read this for us, please. We're actually talking about spiritual affairs. Go ahead.
Seemingly, we can ask, what's so exceptional about the fact that Moses didn't take care of his own needs before carrying out a God-given mission to the Jewish people? The answer is this. Not taking care of his own needs means not only that he didn't take care of personal material needs, but that he didn't even take care of the needs pertinent to this very mission, his spiritual preparations for receiving the Torah, including and specifically rendering himself fit to receive the Torah from Mount Sinai.
I think the case, thank you, Sonia. I think the case that we are making here is beginning to become clear. Moshe showed the way of leadership. He said, look, there might be very important, very holy things, maybe even some great advice. Maybe there was a particular meditation, spiritual meditation that Moshe could have done, which would have helped him to gather the Jewish people and get them ready to do what they need to do. But that was not Moses' quality as a leader. Moses' main quality as a leader was to put the needs of his people first. Or, if I may put it into other words for a moment, to ignore all of the business, managerial, and leadership tips that there are out there, and just start doing. Actually start leading. How many people do you hear about that they're so busy reading the books that they're not actually leading properly? They're still busy trying to follow the rules that it says, that they're not actually caring about the people that they're leading and actually leading them. Instead, they're busy walking through a particular tip that they read, which, to be honest, is really more of a selfish thing than a leadership thing. You're not caring about the other person. You're caring about yourself. Am I the perfect manager? You're not really actually leading properly.
I'm confused. What's being asked? Why Moshe didn't participate in the building of the Mishkan the way everyone else?
No. Here the discussion. We shifted stories for a moment. We were talking about the Mishkan. Now we're talking about Moshe Rabbeinu at Har Sinai. Moshe is told by God to go down and get the Jewish people ready for Mount Sinai. And the pasuk tells us, the verse tells us, he went down min hahar el ha'am, directly from the mountain to the nation. And Rashi points out that he didn't stop along the way to do anything. And what the Rebbe is emphasizing here, is that Moshe is displaying true leadership. True leadership is not about starting, and it's not about closing. It's about doing. It's about going right away and taking care of the people, because that's your job. Mm-hmm. Okay? And that is particularly, and Kalman, once you're unmuted, if you can please read for us text 7. That is particularly the point that the princes should have learned from Moshe Rabbeinu. And then we'll start to analyze whether they did or they didn't. Go ahead.
The princes' first concern was to get the community to donate as much as they could. Only then did they start thinking about their own contribution for the Mishkan, at which point they brought the Shoham stones.
So the princes went down, and they decided our first responsibility is to inspire. Maybe they had read some leadership books. Maybe they just felt this was the right approach. We should come down. Us starting is not as important as us being the delegators. We're going to tell everybody what to do. We're going to explain to them exactly how to do it. We'll be there. We'll be helping out. And then at the end, we'll give our part. But they only got involved in the actual action after all the rest of the Jewish people had given. Now, we're stuck with a question, remember? Remember they told everybody that they already have too much? They were such successful inspirers. They had inspired so successfully that the Jewish people brought so much, and there was nothing left to bring, right? So then where does this void, where does this lack of materials, particularly the spices, the stones, and the oil, where does that come from? Why were those things missing? So Rabbi Chaim Ibn Attar, otherwise known as the Or HaChaim HaKadosh, for those of you that have the book, you can read about him on page 152, 16th century scholar, the Or HaChaim. He shares with us a very, very interesting perspective. It's not that there wasn't enough. There was, and Stephanie, if I can ask you to read it for us, please. There was enough. There was enough cash to purchase everything. But the princes came and they said, you know what? We're going to spare that step of going and buying stuff. You don't have to go to Home Depot and get this stuff. We're actually going to bring the direct materials that are needed. Go ahead, Stephanie.
The Torah tells us all the raw materials necessary for the Mishkan construction was donated. None of them had to be purchased with the contribution funds.
Thank you. And Marilyn, if you can drive home the point for us. So therefore, what were the, text 9a, what were the princes doing with their donation? Go ahead.
When we say the community completed everything and the work was sufficient, we mean this: even for items from the 13 special materials that they did not have on hand, the Jewish people met the need by donating lots of silver, etc., including the amount necessary to purchase the shoham stones and the filling stones, etc.
So now we have two things going on at the same time. There is enough money, and we want to stop the donations because this is ridiculous, right? We have way too much going on here. There's a lot of donations, plenty of money to go around. We just have this one issue. We actually need to purchase the items, okay? We also have a particular group, I'm not calling them lazy just yet, of 12 people who haven't donated anything to the temple yet. So a shidduch is made. The 12 princes say, you know what? We'll spare you guys the trip to Home Depot. We'll provide the materials, the stones, the spices, the oil. We'll bring it to you, and that will be that. And that will be our donation. So it wasn't really a needed donation, and there was enough money to have bought it, and that money probably went into the reserves to help with the repairs and the sacrifices and everything else that had to be done later, as we mentioned. But they said, we will actually purchase the material. We will bring the actual materials. Okay? Where do we hold it here? Marilyn, you were in the middle of reading for us, right? Text 9b yes. Finishes off this point. Go ahead.
The princes felt their part in donating to the Mishkan didn't equal up to everyone else's. When everyone else donated their materials, they were really meeting the needs of the Mishkan. But when the princes donated, there was no longer such a need because there was already enough money in the coffers to purchase the shoham stones. It emerges that their role was simply to bring the actual stones, taking away the need to go out and buy them.
Okay.
It's just what you said.
This is all fine and dandy. Yeah, well, I got it from there. This is all fine and dandy. The question is just, why are we calling them lazy? Right? And if I may add another thing, by the way, what is it? Because we know that they did learn some sort of lesson, right? The princes actually learned a lesson after the donations of the Mishkan. And when it comes to the dedication of the Mishkan, they're the first ones to do it. And they put on a spectacular 12-day show, right? Where they're dedicating the temple for 12 days with donations, with sacrifices, and with everything, right? So what is it particularly that they learned? And what is it, meaning in other words, why are they being called lazy? And what is that lesson that they learned, which afterwards they then had a change of heart? Okay, so in order to understand this, it's important to understand the role of the Mishkan, the role of the tabernacle, as always, right? If we go behind the scenes, we'll understand a little more. And it's important to understand the context, in this case, the chronological context of when this is all happening, okay? So let's connect these two stories. Torah is given on the 6th day of the month of Sivan, right? That is, according to some opinions, a Shabbat, but leaving that aside for a second, that is the holiday that we commemorate every year, the holiday of Shavuot, when we commemorate the giving of the Torah at Mount Sinai, Matan Torah. Beautiful. Moses climbs up the mountain. He's up there for 40 days and 40 nights, receiving the Torah, so to speak, right? Okay, he doesn't get the full thing, but he comes down with a set of tablets. We got a big problem on our hands. The Jews are dancing around the golden calf, right? So he takes those tablets and he smashes them. Anybody know what day this is? 40 days later, after the giving of the Torah. Anybody? It's also not the 10th of Av. Good. The night, not the 9th of Av. That was a good try. Almost. It's the 17th day of the month of Tammuz, which kind of also makes sense, right? Because 30 days in a month. So from the 6th or 7th day of Sivan, which is when they got the Torah, 30 days plus 10 is the 17th, right? So the 17th day of the month of Tammuz is actually a Jewish fast day. We were fasting over this calamity that happened, that the second tablets were broken. Okay, great. I mean, not great, terrible. But on this day, Moses comes down from the mountain. There's a lot of damage control. For 3 days, he's doing damage control. And now he has to go back up onto the mountain for another 40 days and 40 nights in order to ask forgiveness for the Jewish people. Because God says, I'm going to destroy the entire Jewish nation and start again with you. So Moses begs for forgiveness to the Jewish people, and he successfully gets that forgiveness. And he also needs to get new tablets, right? A new set of luchot, and hear the rest of the Torah. Okay, so he does a second set of 40 days and 40 nights to receive the rest of the Torah and to get the second set of tablets. This brings us to Rosh Chodesh Elul, because remember, there was 3 days of damage control from the 17th day of the month of Tammuz until the 20th day of the month of Tammuz. 10 days till the end of Tammuz, plus 30 days of Av. See what I did there? Of the month of Av. Together, 40 days, 40 nights that he was up there. Brings us to Rosh Chodesh Elul, or the first day of the month of Elul. Great. But he's up there for another 40 days and 40 nights, right? Achieving forgiveness, beseeching God to forgive the Jewish people. 40 days and 40 nights later brings us to where? Anybody still calculating with me, or I lost everybody?
Yom Kippur.
Thank you. Brings us to Yom Kippur. That is the day when God said, Salachti kitvarecha, I have forgiven you as per as per your words, as per your request. What does that mean? And by the way, again, it works the opposite way. Yom Kippur becomes, because this becomes the day of forgiveness for this mega sin, so it's a mega day of forgiveness. According to Chassidus, we would explain that energy, that godly energy, was a brand new energy that the world hadn't seen before, a tremendous level of forgiveness. So that energy is still there every day. On that day, we can tap into that forgiveness, and that's why we spend the whole day in shul trying to get ourselves forgiven for anything that's going on. Okay, great, beautiful. What happens the day after Yom Kippur? Text 10. Alan, if you can read for us, please. Alan, you with us?
Oh, sorry. Yeah, go ahead.
Text 10, please. The day after Yom Kippur.
Rabbi, where it says Rabbi Yehuda?
Yes, please.
Rabbi Yehuda said in the name of Rabbi Shalom, on Yom Kippur, Moses was told, they shall make me a sanctuary. Thus, it was on Yom Kippur that the Jewish people were forgiven. And it was on that very day that God said, they shall make me a sanctuary, and I will dwell among them, so that the nations of the world should see that he forgave the Jewish people for the golden calf. This is why the tabernacle was called the Tabernacle Testimony, because it serves as a testimony to the whole world that God dwells in the sanctuary of the Jewish people.
Thank you. So that's a medrash that really packs a heavy punch. So whoa, there's a lot of emotion behind this particular mission of the Jewish people. You know, there might be other things that the Jewish people did throughout the ages, and there were many different things. They were told to go out and collect manna. I'm not sure how much emotion there was behind that. They were excited. There's food, there's this. Great, beautiful. But here, imagine the anxiety. The Jewish people as a whole realized that we as a nation really messed up. Hi, Marty. Good to see you. We really messed up as a nation with this golden calf. God just told us with the 10 commandments, the first 2 commandments, I am the Lord your God and don't have any others besides me, right? We then went and we served the golden calf. I say we because it was our neshamas, right? Even though we like to say, oh, I take no responsibility. Yes, we do. Because it was our neshamas, it was our souls that were there. So imagine the anxiety and the eagerness that the Jewish people have when they realized this was just a huge error and we really messed up. They really want to find some way to make this better, right? Now, we all know when we make mistakes in life, a really big mistake that you really realize that you botch up, you become very eager to fix it. And if somebody gives you a real way to fix it, whatever it is, let's say, I don't know, you smash a beautiful vase, and you know that there's a place to buy that vase, you go that day. You might have 5 other important things, but if you smash somebody's important vase, you go that day and you buy one. Right? Because thank God there's a physical manifestation of how I can actually repair this issue and make this better again. Perhaps even greater than the forgiveness that Hashem gave the Jewish people was to say, and you know what? I'm going to give you a very physical way that we can manifest this forgiveness, and that you can see that this is over, that we're back and we're better than ever before. Our relationship is as solid as it ever will be. Because remember, the Jewish people betrayed God, right? And what is that way? That way is the Mishkan. This Mishkan, this tabernacle, was accompanied by an emotional anxiety and eagerness on behalf of the Jewish people, on the part of all the Jewish people, to make amends for the golden calf. This begins to explain why they were so eager to donate. I mean, I don't want to give any stereotypes to Jews here, but it's not so typical. You know what I mean? And the Jewish people come, and they really show up this time. And as a matter of fact, we see that anxiety displayed in a particular Rashi at the end of the story. Once the tabernacle is built, and now it's time for the dedication of the tabernacle, we see a very interesting Rashi. Buzz, are you up to reading? I don't know.
He's muted.
He's muted. Okay, so maybe then we'll go to I guess Marilyn. Go ahead. I was going to ask Marty, but I guess he's too far back. Text 11, this particular Rashi, from when they were dedicating it, we see the emotional anxiety among the Jewish people.
Throughout all 7 days of the investitures preceding the inauguration, when Moses erected the Mishkan, performing the service in it, and then dismantled it daily, the Shekinah did not rest in it. The Israelites were humiliated, and they said to Moses, "Moses, our teacher, all the efforts we have taken were so that the Shekinah would dwell among us, so that we would know that we have been forgiven for the sin of the golden calf."
So some of you might not be familiar with, thank you, Marilyn. Some of you might not be familiar with what's going on here. When the Mishkan was erected, there was this, before the Mishkan was actually begun to be dedicated with the 12-day process, there was also 7 days of practice run, for lack of, one second, finish off, go ahead.
Therefore, Moses answered them, "My brother Aaron is more worthy and important than I, insofar as through his offerings and his service, the Shekinah will dwell among you, and you will know that God has chosen him."
So there was this 7-day kind of practice run or rehearsal. And for 7 days, Moshe went through, because he had heard it directly from God, so he went through the whole process 7 times. Every day, he would wake up in the morning and build the entire Mishkan, alone, by the way, pretty miraculous. He would then sacrifice the sacrifices, bring the incense, light the menorah, do the whole shebang, and then take apart the entire Mishkan. He did this for 7 days in a row. The problem was the Jewish people weren't seeing any sort of presence of Hashem resting. No cloud came, no clouds of glory, no nothing. So the Jewish people started to get really anxious. We did something wrong. What did we do wrong? Moshe, tell us, what did we do wrong? We brought all of our money, we brought everything, we brought our best skilled workers, and something's going wrong. And Moshe said, calm down, guys. I know you guys are really eager to get this over with and really eager to make amends, but there's a process to it. What I'm doing now is just a practice run, a dry run. On the 8th day, by Yom Hashmini, the parsha that we read right before Pesach, on the 8th day, finally, Aaron and his children, the ones who are supposed to bring the sacrifice, they come after having watched the rehearsal for 7 days. They bring the sacrifices, and that's when the fire comes down from above to swallow up the sacrifices. That's when there's a cloud of glory that comes to rest there, and the Jewish people see that they have actually been forgiven. Not just because Moshe tells them he heard the word from Hashem, but actually because they see the physical manifestation of that forgiveness. Okay, beautiful. And here's where we get back to what true leadership is. A true leader cares first and foremost about his people. What the Nesiim did wrong the first time around was that they didn't appreciate that sense of urgency and that sense of anxiety that the Jewish people had. Sometimes, if you stand there and your company is on fire, and everybody's staging a mutiny and they're rebelling and everything like that, and you say, you know what, I read in this book that one of the good things to do in order to make employees feel good is you should put a ball pit in the lounge, because then it'll create a sense of fun and excitement. It's a beautiful tip, and I encourage you, if you have a company, put a ball pit in the lounge. You know what I mean, or in the cafeteria, whatever it is, or to put, what does Google have? Those the sleeping pods that people, whatever it is, beautiful ideas. If you have a sense of a lack of morale among your team, all these tips are not going to help you. You need to start acting. You need to feel that tempo, because as a true leader, your most important job is to lead without any fancy terminology, not leading by example and not leading from behind. Your important job right now is to feel where the people are at and act. And that's what the Nesiim were missing. Think of this from a parenting perspective, or really, I should say, I think about this from a parenting perspective, because that's one of the leadership roles that I have in my life, right? Imagine if you read a book, and the book says that the best parenting technique is to do X, Y, and Z, and talk in this way, and use this language, etc. First of all, if you forget that if it's not working, it's not working, and you have to throw all the tips out the window, then we're missing something, right? But you're missing the whole point. But more importantly, if you neglect to realize that, let's say you have one kid and another kid, and it's really working for those kids. You're using that language, you're using those techniques, and everything is working. And you're like, this is my parenting hack, and this is the way it goes. And as is wont to happen, comes along child number 3 or child number 4 or child number 2, whatever it is. And they're very different than all the rest of the children. And you say to yourself, but I'm going to stick to my guns. I know this is a tip and it works and it's worked with 2 kids. I'm going to keep going and keep going and keep going. It borders on abuse. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
You got to recognize that this child is different. It's your goal and your job to lead this child and parent this child in the way. When it comes to parenting, we have the famous words of our sages. Chanoch lanar al pi darko. Educate a child as per his way. Each child in their way. It has to be done in the right way. What works for one doesn't work for the other. This is what the Nesiim were missing. And this is what they learned come around the second time. Laura, can you read for us again, please? Text 12.
True, a leader's job is to make sure the Jewish people fulfill their responsibilities. But at the same time, the princes should have taken care to build the Mishkan quickly, making sure everything needed was ready as soon as possible. Therefore, in this case, waiting around for the community to donate what they will donate and whatever they are missing we will complete was out of place. Precisely because they were leaders, even as they encouraged the Jewish people to donate as much as they could, they ought to have simultaneously hurried to bring their own gift so that the Mishkan could be completed as soon as possible.
Thank you. I don't want anybody to get me wrong. Leadership is by example. Leadership needs humility. Leadership needs honesty. Leadership needs, here, I'm going to pull up the list like that I can quote everybody's. Here we go. Leadership needs service. Leadership needs decisiveness. Leadership needs musical training. Leadership needs to be mission oriented and needs wisdom and needs patience. You always need to finish everything. These are all important things when it comes to leadership. But perhaps most important is to be able to keep your eyes open and your heart open to sense what the real need is right now and step up to the plate and act and do. Remember Moshe Rabbeinu's method of leadership? He had all sorts of, the books might have told him, what do you mean? They give you the Torah Mount Sinai. You don't think he had his own spiritual preparations that he needed to do to get himself ready to actually speak to God? I'm sure he did. But Moshe Rabbeinu knew that more important than that as a leader is to put aside my own needs for a second. I'll find my time to do that and to answer the call of the hour. And if that call of the hour is that the Jewish people are feeling a sense of urgency, then that's what we need to do. I want to share with you a story that from the Mittler Rebbe. So the second Chabad Rebbe, I'll give you the full background later, but I really feel that this illustrates the point of true leadership being when you recognize there's something that needs to be done right now and you put your own needs aside in order to just do it. If I can ask Phil, if you can read for us again, please, text 13, to read for us this powerful story of the Mittler Rebbe.
The Mittler Rebbe, Rabbi Dovir of Lubavitch, second Chabad Rebbe, embarked on a campaign to disseminate the teachings of Hasidus throughout the world. To this end, he instructed all his Hasidim, when they would visit Lubavitch, to teach Hasidus publicly in every town they would pass on the way home. One of the Hasidim who would recite the Hasidic teachings noticed the positive effect his words had on his listeners. And he approached the Rebbe with a question.
Go ahead.
He had a very good grasp of the material, and he had a talent for teaching it to others in an impactful way. Thus, he was starting to feel proud, even somewhat egotistical about him. Hasidim relate that the middle rabbi answered him, even if you become like an onion, you should still teach Hasidut.
Thank you. Now, just to clarify,
Oh, there's the onion.
an onion in Hasidic terms is not a very flattering analogy. Onions have a sharp and pungent flavor and smell. They're hard to miss. And probably your first they're probably your first example of haughtiness and egotism, etc. An onion says, every single dish has me in it. I come there and I give my odor and I give my flavor, and you could smell them from a mile away, right? It reminds you of some people, that they're so full of themselves, you could smell them from a mile away, right? This particular chassid had a very big struggle in his hands. It's like, look, the Rebbe wants me to be spreading chassidus, spreading the messages of the Torah to all sorts of other people and sharing that with other people, and I'd like to be doing that. But I have a problem. On the other hand, I have a very deep personal issue that this is causing by me. I feel like I'm not the right messenger for the job. This is very egotistical, and it's really getting to me. And it's starting to make me a tough person. I don't like being that kind of person. I don't like being egotistical. What is the Mitzvah Rebbe's advice? He says, even if you become an onion, you should continue to help others. Why? Because true leadership is that, don't get me wrong, you have to deal with your onion problem. You have to deal with your ego, of course you do. But if you're suffering a little bit, even spiritually speaking, you're suffering a little bit because you're helping others, true leadership is to put aside your own needs and help someone else. So l'chaim. Sometimes it's difficult and sometimes it's easy. It's never really easy. But we have to learn to put aside our own difficulties, our own challenges, which are all things that we should worry about, especially if they're spiritual. We should be worrying about them. We should be dealing with them in our own time, not when we're being a leader. When we're being a leader, our job is to be in tune with all of those around us. Our job is to be in tune with what is needed, with what the call of the hour is, and to step up to the plate and act and make it happen. And just like the Nesiim learned from their mistake, and when it came to the dedication of the temple, they were there first, front and center, helping to inaugurate the temple, to celebrate the true forgiveness which was given to the Jewish people. Through the building of the Mishkan, we too, even if we haven't always been the best leaders, we can learn from our mistakes and help and be the first ones to roll up our sleeves and do mitzvahs and be the shining example in our environment. If I may say so, that same anxiety, that same eagerness, which it was by the Jewish people at that time, should be felt by us today. We have the privilege of living in the generation which immediately precedes, the Rebbe said this all the time, immediately precedes the coming of Mashiach. And it's up to us, our last actions. If we act with urgency, with eagerness, and with anxiety right now, don't get me wrong, I'm not encouraging anxiety. If you have an anxiety problem, we shouldn't.
Wait, please, no anxiety, no anxiety.
But a sense of urgency, the fact that Mashiach is coming right now, then we don't spend time figuring out, so how, what, where, when. We have to bring Mashiach. It's time to do a mitzvah. All right, I'm not up to this mitzvah yet. I'm not up to that mitzvah yet. But there's a mitzvah to be done right here in front of us right now. Let's go and grab it by the horns and do it. L'chaim, l'chaim.